Welcome back everyone. Today I'm going to finish the Stripe Connect checkout process to complete the tutorial. This tutorial will involve checking out and paying the $5 to the connected account business. In addition, we'll take a portion of it. Per the documentation, we have completed part 1, 2, and 3 of the process. And part 4 is really about accepting payment for the business. And here, as you can see, the documentation talks about what we need to send to Stripe in order to make the session work. And finally, after the checkout, we will be handling post-payment events using cloud functions in order to create a webhook. Great, let's get started. From a design perspective, I'm not going to go through the whole design process of making a checkout form and so on. You can do that based on your business requirements. Here, I've just made a simple button and we're just going to process $5 flat fee with this simple button. So the first thing we're going to do is config the API call for the checkout session. So let's go back to FlutterFlow and create that API call. The first thing we're going to do is add the API call for checkout session. So let's quickly call this sessions. And the endpoint we need per documentation is checkout/sessions. And per the documentation, what we need to pass in is the connected account in the header. So if you go through documentation, you'll see it. What we're doing here is going to be a Stripe hosted checkout page. So it will redirect the user to Stripe checkout page and to make the final payment. So as you can see here, the header, we need this format. So because our Stripe connected account is different for different users, we're going to pass in the header of the Stripe account we created in the previous session. So here we'll write this Stripe account here. It's going to be a variable. So it'll be connected account of post, and the body we need. It's going to be similar XML URL code encoded. And what we need per the documentation are these fields. So the first field we need is a URL. And the second field we need is success URL. The first one we need is the line item. And it's going to be of 0, of price and currency. The second line item is going to be line item of 0, price data, and name. You can read a lot more about this API documentation on Stripe. So you go to the Stripe documentation, which I've referred to multiple times per the videos. You can see here what it's asking for when you have a session. So for example, here we need to provide information such as currency, the line item, and which you can see all the children parameters it accepts, and the return URL and success URL. So let's go back to FlutterFlow. So we're up to here. So what else we need? So we've provided the cancel URL, success URL, the currency, the name. So here you can just write a general name, whatever you want Stripe to the user to show at the end. It could be, for example, whatever they're buying. It could be shoes or simply your business's name. The next one we need to provide is the amount. Here, the amount is going to be in hundreds. So for example, it's 1 cent, it'll be integer of 1. If it's $1, it'll be 100. The last one we need is quantity as a required field. Here we can just specify 1 or 2 or whatever we want to show to the user. And lastly, the one is mode. So all these are going to be from variable, which we'll create in a second. So let's go create these variables. So the first variable we need is the connected account variable. The second variable we need is the cancel URL. Third one is going to be success URL, the currency, the product name, unit amount, quantity. So in particular, the product name and the quantity will be based on what your business needs are. So I won't talk too much about it, but we do need to pass the unit amount in the hundreds for $1. So it's going to be all, it's going to be integer for unit amount, and quantity is also going to be integer. Now let's config this back again. So cancel connect. This is connected account is here. Cancel URL will be here. Success URL with this variable. Currency with this variable. I believe this is product name. Let's do this. Unit amount, this, quantity, this. And the mode we need to set is really a specific value, which is of payments. Not subscription, is basically payment. We're making that Stripe payment that we want to do. So let's quickly variable, advanced settings, make it private similarly, which is by default. And then let's quickly save this. And what we need here, we can actually test it out. I just copy some random account names that I've set up already. Let's go USD, product name will be test. Amount is going to be $10, so which is 1,000 unit amount, quantity. And here, let's quickly test that API call. Great, it came back with something. And here you can see this is the URL we need to copy and show to navigate the user to. You can see here, this is the checkout. So you can see here that this is what gets shown to the user when they check out. You can see here it's $10 for a product name of test. Great. Let's save that. Let's remember to always deploy your private API. So I'll quickly deploy this. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that if your payment wants to collect application fee amount, which is basically the revenue you receive for connecting the customer to this connected account, you can actually just pass in this variable into the body. So it's called payment intent data application fee amount. So here in this example, they're passing in 123 as the amount. So this is basically, you know, what gets transferred back to you from the connected accounts balance once they finish transacting. So you can easily set that up by going to adding a payment intent data application fee amount. And let's just say in this example, we're taking 100 cents, which is $1 of the total transaction. This one could be a variable in a way that you take, for example, 10% of the value. So you just put integer, and then when you do the checkout, you pass that value of 10% times the total unit amount into the application fee amount. That's, you're taking 10% of the total transaction. I'll just remove this to make it much easier for everybody. Let's go back to FlutterFlow's front end to config this checkout and pay $5. So we need to add an action. The first action we're going to do here is let's record in the back end this transaction is going through. So what I've already set up is a transaction table. Very basic here. We're going to just have a Stripe session ID and the amount. You can capture other metadata fields such as who is the buyer ref will be document reference of user. You can capture all these other metadata based on what you need from the business. But in its most basic sense, I'm simply going to capture the Stripe session ID, which is what will be generated based on the Stripe checkout and the amount. In order to get the Stripe session ID, I actually got to grab this from here as well, the ID JSON response. So I'm going to quickly grab this, add path, put an ID here, save. So let's config the action here. So the first thing we're going to do is create a document. This is just this is recording in our back end that this transaction is going through. And what we want to record is simply, let's just config the amount. The amount's going to be a specific value of $5, which is 500. You can set as a variable based on whatever you're selling. That will be based on your business needs. The next action we're going to do is adding the API call of checkout session. So let's go to API call, Stripe group, sessions. And then let's call this session output. So we're passing in the variable. So we're going to pass all these variables in. So you're going to pass the connected account. And remember how we set up the connected account is going to be on the user's Stripe account ID or whatever you're going to, wherever you can obtain the Stripe account ID based on your business requirements. So it could be saved somewhere in an organization collection, or it could be saved in a business collection. That's ultimately your setup. But you still need to pass in who is the connected account you're transacting with. Next, it's going to be cancel URL. I'm just going to make it a very quick one. I think it was test HTML. So I'm just going to copy this cancel URL as cancel. And this is success URL as this. Success. This is ultimately based on your app, where you want the cancel page to go, where you want the success page to go. Next one is currency. I'm going to just say USD. You can hard code it. You can set it as variable if you're transacting multiple currencies. Product name. I'm just going to call this test Stripe. This could be a variable as well based on your needs. The amount. Remember, $5 is 500. And then lastly, I'm going to pass in quantity of 1. So what we need to do here. So if it fails, let's just add maybe an alert dialog saying it failed, didn't work. And then let's add a terminate. So if it does work, it will come back with a session ID. Now we're going to update that newly created transaction document with the session ID that came back from Stripe's response. So let's go back to here. I believe it's called transaction output reference. This is what we created here as the new, which is what we created here when we create a new document, transaction output. We're going to update this now. Let's update the session ID to be whatever Stripe responded from the session output API response. It's going to be from JSON body, JSON path. We have already configured JSON path. Predefined path of ID, and then we're going to press OK. And then next we're going to launch the URL of what Stripe has responded back with. And similarly, the URL is basically the session output of JSON body, predefined path, which we defined earlier, URL. Confirm. Let's test this to see if it works. Let's run it. Okay, now that's loaded, let's check out and pay $5. So once I click checkout, this Stripe checkout flow opens. $5. This is the Stripe connected account name I created, and here the user can continue to check out, enter the bank account details or credit card information to continue checking out. We can also see here in the back end, under the transactions collection, we have created a new checkout session. You can, as always, you can store other metadata such as user ID, the buyer ID, your internal organization ID, so on and so on. That's ultimately based on your needs. But here I've recorded the session ID and the amount that's checking out. Cool. Now that's set up, we need to configure step 5 of this, which is handling post-payment events. So we're going to set up a webhook to find out whether the customer has finished the checkout process. So what we need to create is a webhook. So the webhook needs to receive certain events, and the events we're receiving is checkout session completed, and it will give us information about, based on the event, it will give us certain information and attributes. In order to do this, we need to set up a cloud function. And the cloud function, basically, let's quickly call this cloud function called Stripe Webhook. And I've already written the code, so I can explain to you what it does really. So the first thing it does is that it listens for a webhook event called checkout session completed. And based on receiving the data object of event data object, it breaks down that information and creates a payment collections that allows us to record the checkout session ID, which is the data object ID, the payment status, which is the data object status, the total amount, currency, and a timestamp. You can add more fields as necessary, which you can refer to based on the Stripe documentation. So here we can see the code has been deployed, and in order to link Stripe to this exact webhook we have just created, we need to go to our Stripe developer account, the dashboard, go to API, go to webhooks, add endpoint, And the URL endpoint is based on, you can easily find it by going to your Firebase and then this exact link here, which we can just quickly copy and provide it, and write something like Stripe, like maybe we can just document what this is about. So this is about session.completed, and then we're going to listen for events on the connected accounts. And the event we want to listen to is checkout session completed. Add endpoint. And once that endpoint has been created, you can actually see the signing secret. So you can review it. And this is the secret you want to update based on this line of code here. This line of code, line number 14. Let's see if this works. So here we're gonna check out and pay $5, but we're gonna actually enter our credit card details in addition to completing transaction. So let's quickly enter the information we need. And per Stripe's documentation, you can actually provide some fake credit cards to use. So just enter those information. And then let's press, before I press pay, let's go back to our Firebase database and see whether it created a transaction. I believe it's this one. Let's go pay. So it's processing payment. And then once it finished processing, it will navigate to the success URL, which we have provided. I think it was just a test.url or success, something like that. Perfect. Now let's see whether the webhook worked. So when I actually looked at the webhook status, it actually failed. And the reason is your client does not have permission from this server. The reason why it's happening, you can easily Google. And find out the reason. But this is because for the webhook we created just then, we did not enable all users to be a Cloud Function invoker. So we didn't therefore enable Stripe to invoke this Cloud Function. In order to do this, this is the first result from Stack Overflow. We can easily just go to our Cloud Function in console, check it, press permissions, and add a new user. And this user is called all users. And then what we want to do is search for invoker. Press save. So this will allow this webhook to be publicly accessible by all users to invoke it. So policy is updated. So let's try again to see if this works. Let's check out and pay $5. Okay, so the payment has succeeded, and therefore we navigated back to the test URL success page. Here, we can see here this transaction succeeded. The webhook actually worked. And let's go back to our backend and refresh our Firestore. And here we can see there's a payments collection created from the webhook. And here the payment status is actually paid. And the session ID CS test A1Q. Let's go to transactions. And we can see here this actually matches the transaction here. CS test A1Q, so on and so on. So this is how you set up a webhook in FlutterFlow and Google Console to listen to a Stripe event. Subsequently, we will also need to create 3 other webhooks to store these to listen to these events. The process is exactly the same. I'll link below the code. However, all we're changing simply here is the event we're listening for. Instead of event type equals checkout.session.completed, we're listening for async payment succeeded and async payment failed. Please note that if you have any problems deploying Cloud Functions, I would recommend you to Google Cloud Function FlutterFlow error. There's a huge post on the community about it, about discussion and what you can do to fix it. In addition, to make sure your package.json has this Stripe component inside. This is the package that the Cloud Function is leveraging when you're deploying the function. So I hope this 2-part series helped you set up Stripe Connect and allowed your business to be a marketplace, facilitating transactions between buyers and sellers, but at the same time taking a proportion of the value. Unfortunately, FlutterFlow still currently do not have a out-of-the-box solution for Stripe Connect, which is why we have to go through the complex process of setting up API calls and webhooks to make sure the transaction has been processed correctly, and of us taking a cut in order to obtain the revenue. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like this video for more content on FlutterFlow.